suddenly we're looking at a number of European countries, Hungary, Austria, who have shifted to more pro-Russian positions. And I think you've got to start asking, at NATO, they'll start asking the question, well, where does this end? Who's coming next? So they might be worried about not just about Romania, but about a kind of a kind of momentum, which means that this is not the end. Could be just the latest.
Well, look, you've been writing and covering these Russian attacks on the Romanian election. This top security council in Romania has effectively unclassified documents confirming this. So how significantly do we think this Russian attack on the election actually affected the vote count of the man that won the first vote, Kalin Georgescu?
I think it's important to say that you need to clarify here a little bit, because what the Romanians were talking about on Wednesday was, on the one hand, aggressive hybrid Russian attacks during the voting. They then talked about the manipulation of algorithms on TikTok. They talked about money being paid to influencers to back Kalin Georgescu, even though he had listed officially that he'd spent zero on his campaign. And also computer hacking attacks on election computers there in Romania. All those things happened. In the meantime, they are also talking about hybrid Russian attacks, but what they haven't done is actually specifically come out and say that the Russians were behind all this, though I think that their implication is that they clearly believe it was Russia behind this, but they haven't actually specifically come out and say that. What they did, however, say is that the hacking attacks on election computers, which was one of the reasons that they decided to have a recount of all the votes after that November 24th vote, was down to, they consider, a state actor. They said that the amount of attacks, they had something like 85,000 attacks on Romania's servers during and just after the voting. They said that kind of assault there had to be a state player behind it.
So we can at least trust the numbers of votes, as it were, the actual outcome. These people of Romania did actually vote for Kalin Georgescu. It's not that there was these attacks on these computers completely misjudged the numbers of votes.
No, this is the point, that the votes were cast by real human beings. What the Romanians are angry about is whether there was such massive manipulation of TikTok that people sort of pushed into voting for Georgescu in an illicit way. So perhaps there was a manipulation of algorithms to the point that he was sort of dominating TikTok, and TikTok is very popular in Romania. To the point, in fact, that it was said that Georgescu was the 9th top trending name on TikTok in the world during the voting. So that gives an idea of just how he was able to kind of bombard TikTok through fair means or foul, and that is seen as having provided an untoward and unjustified stimulus to voters.
Why is this not necessarily just another case of the right rising up in Romania in the same way as we've seen so much throughout Europe in recent years?
I was in Romania last week. I interviewed Georgescu. I spoke to quite a lot of people in Bucharest, and I got the feeling that whether or not there was a kind of artificial boost to his presence on social media, which in turn influenced voting, nevertheless, 2 million people did vote for him, real people, and they have real grievances that he's tapped into. For example, the runaway inflation in Romania, very serious problem with prices soaring there. People have really felt the pinch. And secondly, resentment against Ukrainian refugees. Now, Romania has a long border with Ukraine, and thousands of Ukrainians have poured into the country over the last 2 years seeking safety, and they have been well looked after by the Romanian government, prompting anger amongst lower income Romanians who've been saying, well, why is that Ukrainian kid getting bigger benefits than my own kid? And I think that's what he has tapped into in Romania. So people who are already, struggling with the weekly groceries are seeing Ukrainian kids at school with their own kids who seem to be getting paid more benefits than they are.
Given that Ukrainian border that you just mentioned and the pro-Russia stance of Georgescu, what impact might his election actually have on Ukraine and the war effort if he does become the president? Because it's not quite as all-encompassing as, say, being Donald Trump in the White House, I don't think, is it? There's more to Romanian politics than that.
Sure. I think that certainly he can't step in and stop the war tomorrow if he's elected. And his position is also slightly vague. When I said to him, look, do you want to get out of NATO? Because that's what's been said in the past. He said, no, we don't want to get out of NATO. We don't want to get out of the EU. But we want to have more room to negotiate. Now, what that means, he wouldn't be clear about. But what is important is the fact that Romania hosts a large NATO base, which is undergoing expansion. It also hosts the site of an American missile defense system, and which he has criticized in the past. So the question would be, if he becomes president, would he push for the base to be downsized? Would he push for the missile system, anti-missile system, to be dismantled? And can he do that if he's president? I mean, the president of Romania has sort of semi-executive powers. He does have power over foreign policy, but the parliament is very much a counterbalance. So it remains to be seen whether he really could call the shots over matters like that. The US is already concerned. The Washington put out a strongly worded statement about the fears over social media manipulation, saying that they were keeping an eye on things and were pretty alarmed. So, the world is watching.
And with regards to Ukraine, is that they will inevitably be concerned, I would have thought. But this isn't turning Romania into sort of Belarus Mark II, is it, in terms of potential support for Vladimir Putin and its war with Ukraine?
No, you're right. He only went as far as saying to me, when I asked him about Putin and his views on Putin, he said, Putin is a patriot. And then he added, but I also consider Donald Trump a patriot. So he was being quite cagey there. And on the war, he would not be drawn. He simply said, I want the war to end. I said, how would you do that? And he just said, let's change the subject. So again, it's sort of wait and see. He's being deliberately kind of cagey at the moment with interviewers, and hoping, I suppose, that he can reveal his cards after he wins the election.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it sounds, I realise you as a journalist you're here to present facts, but did you get the impression that maybe he's not fully ready personally almost for the presidency? Or I wonder whether it's to come from literally nowhere, even if you do have the support of Russia, which it appears he does, and that might have helped him get to this point. Is he? I wonder if he's almost been taken by surprise at the fact that he might well end up as Romania's president.
What was interesting was that when I was setting the interview up with him, talking to an assistant, the assistant apologized when I asked about the campaign headquarters that perhaps we could do the interview in, saying, we don't have one yet. And the interview was carried out in a house belonging to a friend of his, which he sort of commandeered as a base just outside of Bucharest. So they're very much kind of setting things up as they go along. I suggest that he would feel that he's perfectly ready for the presidency. He seems to be a very confident kind of guy. And whilst we journalists are asking questions about NATO and about Ukraine, he's very prepared, according to him, to deal with what he really wants to focus on, which is something else. And that's making Romania self-sufficient economically in terms of agriculture, in terms of natural resources. He's very big on making Romanian agriculture less dependent on pesticides, on chemicals. And in this, he's very much in line with Robert Kennedy in America, who seems to have this this sort of obsession with getting the chemicals out of food, getting the chemicals out of agriculture. And in fact, Georgescu has written the foreword for a book written by Kennedy, which denounces COVID vaccines. That's another passion they share. Georgescu is very much an anti-vaxxer. So all this kind of stuff he's been thinking about, and that's what he believes his campaign is all about, and hence he's rather kind of impatient about the bigger questions that we're asking about Ukraine and NATO.
Where is he polling now? You said he came from nothing before the first vote, but now we're expecting him to win, aren't we? But how far ahead is he in these polls?
Well, I've seen various polls putting him above 50% ahead of his rival, Elena Lasconi, who's a centrist pro-European candidate. So yeah, as it stands, he's favourite to win on Sunday. We just need to keep an eye, I think, on whether there'll be any more legal challenges to his standing arising from the fact that the Romanian authorities have now said that there may have been skullduggery in his TikTok campaign. So before Romanians vote on Sunday, let's be prepared for any last-minute surprises that may derail his campaign.
And just finally, Tom, fair enough if he doesn't want to answer the questions about NATO and about Ukraine, but I would imagine that NATO has to be prepared for his potential election. I'm sure they're used to making contingencies. Different leaders certainly who've been elected in recent years in Europe have had different views on NATO, and perhaps a little bit more sceptical views on NATO. They will be concerned, I would have thought, without being overly worried. Is that fair to assume?
Well, actually, I think looking at the State Department statement expressing alarm over the voting, I'd say there is quite a lot of alarm. Romania is a big country. It's right there on the Ukrainian border. If Georgescu wins, suddenly we're looking at a number of European countries, Hungary, Austria, who have shifted to more pro-Russian positions. And I think you've got to start asking, at NATO, they'll start asking the question, well, where does this end? Who's coming next? So they might be worried about, not just about Romania, but about a kind of, a kind of momentum, which means that this is not the end. Could be just the latest.